Good morning. How you guys doing? Everybody doing all right? That announcer today, the announcement person, she's hot. None of you guys can agree with me either. Shut up. All the women can, yes. Anyway, we are glad that you guys are here today. We are wrapping up, actually, the series that we've been in over the last several weeks. Has been basically a summer series talking about the amazing promises of God. And we started doing this because a lot of people were coming to me and saying, you know, sometimes I don't feel or seem, it doesn't feel like God is answering my prayers. And so one of the comebacks that I often say is, well, are you praying the promises of God? Because if you want to see God respond, maybe you just start by praying what he has promised. Makes sense, right? And so there's over 7,000 promises in the Bible. And so we've been looking at some of the more prominent promises that have been given by God. So today, I kind of left this one to the end, if you will, because I think this is a promise that only Jesus could make. And so I want to dive into this amazing promise that Jesus has given us. But let me start off by just simply asking a question. How many of you have spent money or it's taking time, but there was something you knew that if you were able to achieve this or receive this or get it or buy it or whatever the case may be, if you received this, it was going to bring this sense of, oh, you know what I'm talking about. Finally, I'm able to have a sense of contentment and satisfaction like never before because of whatever this was. You have something in mind, right? You know, years ago, Mindy and I, we lived in a house and we owned a house and it was actually built in 1836. It was homesteaded by the same family in 1832, so this is pre-Civil War. And then we bought this house, and it was a fixer-upper. I mean, it was the walls were 3 bricks thick. I mean, this house was not going anywhere. But if you can imagine, an older home needs a little TLC once in a while. As a matter of fact, if you know anything about older homes, you work on them. It's just part of it, okay? I remember we had been there for, 6 months or so, and I remember going up to a window in our bedroom, and there was the plaster. This is how old it was. It had the plaster in the walls. Not only was it lath plaster, but it had horsehair in it. That's what kind of web it was that old. And so I go up underneath this window, and there's a little crack in the plaster, and I just went like this. I went, clunk, and this whole section of the wall just fell down. And I'm like, well, okay, guess we're going to remodel the bedroom, okay? Because what I found when it fell, there was actually no insulation in this house, none. So I was like, well, we're going to remodel this bedroom, and that turns into a whole other thing where you're just like, well, if we do this, then we need to do this, and then we need to do this, and we find another thing, and we'd remodel this room, and I'd be satisfied for a little while, and then I'd find something else to do, or the landscaping, or whatever it could, new carpet, and repaint, and new light fixtures, new linoleum, new furnace, new roof. Bedroom remodel, bedroom remodel, bedroom remodel, and bedroom remodel. Every time I turned around, okay, now we need new siding. Do some updates on the wiring. Oh yeah, I'm going to build a pole barn because we had a big property and I had a lawn tractor and I needed a place for that. And so might as well build a pole barn. A little shed isn't going to do. So we built a pole barn and new whiteboard fence and banister on the railing on the balcony outside of our bedroom and new shower upstairs and new bathroom downstairs, and we'll just redo the whole thing, and the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. And this is what I discovered. Every time I thought, you know what, if I just do this one project, I'm going to be satisfied. Then I'd go and visit somebody in their house, and I'd look at something and I'd go, oh, I got to have that. I've got to do that. That would look really nice in our place. And excuse me, and I would set my sights on getting something else. And this is what I realized later, that no matter what I did, no matter how much effort or whatever I put into this, I don't think I was ever going to be satisfied with the turnout. Have you ever been there? Now, I asked a little bit ago if you've ever bought something that you thought was going to be like, grant you peace for the rest of your life on earth. And then you've had it for a little while, or you walk out of the store with it and go, jeez, why'd I buy that? And that happens all the time. And I'm pretty sure that no matter what I do or what we do, many times it doesn't matter what we build or plant, or it's never going to satisfy. And I think this is a pretty good picture of life in general. For many of us, we have so many options, so many things before us that promise satisfaction, right? I mean, that's what billboards do. That's what advertisements do. That's what distracts us many times in life, is going, oh, I need that. Sparkly, whatever it is, that catches our eye. That promises satisfaction. So what do we do? What is it that we pursue next? I mean, these are kind of questions. What do we give ourselves? How do I occupy my time? What do we do? What do we order next? How many of you, the Amazon driver just stops at your house whether he's got a package or not, or she? Because usually there is. Christine, Mindy. And how are we going to get there? Where are we going to go next? All these different things that promise satisfaction. And here's what I want you to understand, okay? This isn't about guilt of pursuing things that try to bring satisfaction in our lives. As a matter of fact, all these things that I labeled earlier or we've talked about, in and of themselves aren't necessarily evil, right? They're not necessarily bad. But here's the big but. Before long, I promise you, if it hasn't happened yet, it will, that chasing after things that you think are going to satisfy, that pursuing things that you think are going to satisfy, and life goes by, okay? It can become a blur, and all of a sudden you're just like, how did I get here? Pursuing all these different things that ultimately really didn't satisfy. And the only time that it really becomes a true issue is when you're pursuing things that don't ultimately really matter, right? How many of you would say that I have pursued things in life that I thought were going to really matter in my life, and ultimately they didn't truly matter? Anybody willing to admit that today? Yeah? It happens. So we have to ask ourselves, is there one thing in life that can bring total and complete satisfaction? We see other people and we think, wow, if I just had what they had, we get into the comparison game. I know nobody else in here does this besides me, but we get into the comparison game. We look at their success, or we look at their marriage, or we look at their home, we look at their life, and you're just like, wow, I really wish I had that, okay? Or sometimes we get down the path and in life, and we start to look back, and we start to compare ourselves to ourselves, and go, wow, if I would have married that guy. No, all the women are just like silent. I'm not saying a word. Right? Or if I would have taken that job, or if I would have made that investment, and we can start living with regrets. And I think sometimes we can sit here and go, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do that? And sometimes we start living unsatisfied lives because we compare ourselves not only to other people, but to ourselves. And there becomes this dissatisfaction in life. So, this begs the question, how do we find satisfaction? Is there anything in this life that can bring satisfaction? What is it that really brings it? So, what is the one thing that truly satisfies? I think Jesus answered this question, okay? We're going to look at this, and I think this is the promise that only Jesus could make, and it's found in John chapter 6. We're going to be in verses 11 through 68, and let me catch you up on what's taking place here, okay? The story goes something like this. Jesus is beside the Sea of Galilee, and this is at a point in his ministry. It's probably at the pinnacle of where people are following him, where he's probably has some of the hugest crowds. His popularity has grown immensely. And so he's speaking to this crowd. Now this crowd, there's estimates of like 15,000 people, okay? Mega church on the Sea of Galilee, okay? And so Jesus is talking to these people, and apparently, they're following him because he's an amazing speaker, but he's done a lot of miracles. He's done a lot of healings. And so they're just like captivated by what's he going to do next. Well, apparently he's been talking for a while, kind of like I can get doing on Sunday mornings. But he's gone all day. I mean, literally all day. And he looks out and the people are starting to get hungry, okay? I understand this. I get hungry, well, relatively easy. And so he sees that the people are hungry, and he starts asking the questions to his disciples. He's like, okay, what are we going to do with all these people? 15, think about that. Some of you get like anxiety over the fact that like 12 people are coming to your house for Thanksgiving. 15,000 people, okay? How are we going to feed them? And so one of his disciples says, Philip, he goes, man, this would take like 6 months' wages, and everybody would just get this little bite if we tried to feed all these people or take money and do that. And then you have this guy, silly little Andrew. I don't know what silly little Andrew was doing, but silly little Andrew comes up to Jesus. Some of you might know this story. And he's got a little boy beside him, and the boy's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he goes, hey, Jesus, look what we got. Seriously? I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, you got 15,000 people, and you've got like 5 loaves of bread and 2 little fish. What was Andrew thinking? I don't really know. But this is what I do know, is that Jesus took that bread and those fish, and it says in verse 11, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated there, okay? So Jesus blesses the loaves and the fishes, and then watch this. How much does he give the people? This is the amazing part. As much as they wanted. Isn't that cool? And then he did the same thing with the fish. So Jesus does this miracle where he multiplies the loaves and the fishes. And I don't want to focus in on that right so much. What I want to focus in on are those words where it says, he gave them as much as they wanted. This wasn't a snack. This wasn't a bite. This was a buffet of bread and fish. And I'm going to guess it was pretty tasty coming from Jesus. Okay? He meets their immediate needs by filling them up. And we're going to see why as this story starts to play out. You see, here's what happens. Later that night, they're full, right? What do we do when we get our bellies full? That's what happens. The hillside, just everybody goes to sleep. In the middle of the night, the disciples and Jesus, as a matter of fact, Jesus walks across the water to the other side of the lake, to Capernaum, okay? And they stay over there. Now, here's the interesting thing. The next morning, the crowds wake up, and they realize that Jesus and the disciples have left. They've gone to the other side of the lake. And the people are like, hey, we got to go where Jesus is at. As a matter of fact, it says in verse 24, once the crowds realized the needs of Jesus or his disciples were there, they got into their boats and they went to Capernaum as well. In search of who? Jesus. Why? Can I tell you why? Why did they follow Jesus across the lake? They were hungry. It's breakfast time. Who fed them the night before? Jesus. Who were they looking for in the morning? Jesus. Why? He's their meal ticket. Seriously. This is why they followed him across the lake. Now, this is where the story gets kind of interesting. This is an important, I believe, principle that we can all learn from and understand. Because spiritually, I think a lot of us experience the same thing, because there's a difference between being stuffed with things and being satisfied with Jesus. They were full physically, but they weren't truly satisfied. And I think that we can all fall into the same trap, that in life, we can become very dissatisfied as we're trying to fill ourselves with stuff, as we try to fill ourselves with different things, that I think many times that we're spiritually starving as we're trying to fill ourselves with stuff. Maybe we're starving, we don't even realize it, because we stuffed ourselves with so many things that we've been chasing after, and we don't even realize the deep spiritual hunger that is gnawing at us that keeps us from ever being satisfied. Does anybody else ever feel that? That gnaws at you? I don't know what it is for you. You know, I was just thinking of different things that we can try to satisfy this hunger inside of us. And it could be work, it could be relationships, it could be sex, it could be money, it could be kids, sports, education, porn. Some people try to fill themselves with satisfaction with somebody that's not their spouse. I mean, the list could go on and on and on of all these different things that we try to find satisfaction in life with. And we're still left with this deep spiritual hunger that gnaws at us. In John chapter 6, this is absolutely just awesome stuff. I want you to watch as Jesus tries to teach these people about this principle. This crowd, the disciples. And if we put ourselves in there, then he's also teaching you and I to move from the hunger pangs of temporary things to a deeper spiritual hunger for him, where true satisfaction is found. Jesus stands there and the crowd is searching for satisfaction, and it's kind of the same way that you and I search for satisfaction today. The problem was they were searching for satisfying themselves in the wrong place. And what was true then is true today, and I think many people who don't really have much for a hunger of God are searching for the wrong things. I believe this is so critical. If we're going to find satisfaction in our lives, we must be honest with ourselves. Okay? What is my strongest desire? Do I truly trust Jesus with my life? Let me ask this question. Do you truly desire Jesus? Let me ask that again, because this is where we're going today. Deep inside of you, what is your strongest desire for in this life? I mean, be real honest with yourself right now. Can you say, and not just because you're in this building today or watching online, can you say that your deepest desire in your life is Jesus? Just Jesus. Because this is what Jesus is asking. In John chapter 6, he's going to ask these people, which I think transcends generation to generation to you and I today, to make a decision. Because I think, as I read this, Jesus kind of got tired of the large crowds following him around, just asking for things. Miracles. You right? To get something from him. I think he was kind of tired of large crowds just waiting for him to put on this amazing show. Look, right? Come and entertain us. Show us some miracles. Give us some food. When Jesus was looking for real followers, when he was looking for people who him being the Son of God was enough. Was enough. So he wants to know, are you coming because you want some type of temporary thing, or are you coming to me because the relationship that I can have with you will last for eternity? You see, here's the thing. Here's the question for you and I today. And I want you to consider this, and I'll unpack it a little bit once I ask the question. But the question that I want you to consider today is, are you following Jesus because you want more from him? Or are you here because you want more of him? Because I think there's a stark difference between the two. And let me talk about this. Jesus actually is the one who asked this question. In verse 32 and 33, he says in John chapter 6, he says, "It is my Father who gives you true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." In verse 34, they were like, the people that were there, they heard this, and they were like, "Sweet, from now on, give us that kind of bread." And they're still thinking physical bread, okay? They're still thinking, hey, if we can if we can eat a meal that we're just totally and completely satisfied from here on out, let us eat that. Wouldn't that be awesome? All you got to do is eat one more time, okay? One more time, that's all you need. And I will, you'll be full for the rest of your life. That's what they're thinking. Verse 35, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never go thirsty." We need to see the spiritual implications in this, right? This is great stuff. This is the promise, okay? This is the promise that Jesus gives. He says, I am. I am what satisfies you. I am what you're looking for. I am, get past the physical stuff, get into the spiritual stuff. I am what's going to bring true satisfaction into your life. There's some real awesome stuff here in the next few verses. Jesus just lays down some claims, okay? He's really bringing this home. Let's jump down to verse 51. Jesus kicks it in the high gear. He says, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world." Verse 53, "I tell you the truth, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will have no life in you." That's some weird stuff. That's some cannibalistic stuff. Really, I mean, it's weird. It's odd. Okay? But, as Jesus often did, he's taking something from the physical realm and he's putting a spiritual spin on it, right? This is what he's doing here. He's communicating a spiritual truth. He wants us to understand that physical food just to sustain us will never truly satisfy us. Okay? It's this physical appetite that gnaws at us for things and more stuff. And he says, but if we can eat of him, if we can have him in our lives, that's what's truly going to satisfy. That's what's truly going to sustain our spiritual lives for eternity. That's what he's saying. This passage is fantastic. Jesus goes to great length. And he does miracles, and he shows who he is through these miracles. He goes to great length to show his love and compassion for people. But in this passage, this is a pivotal moment in Jesus' ministry. And this is going to stun some of you, okay? Because what Jesus does in this passage is he says, don't come looking for me for the physical stuff. How many of you ran into somebody, or maybe you had this thinking, is that everybody that Jesus came across, he healed? He didn't. That everybody he came across, he fed? He didn't. He did a lot. I mean, there's this pool of Bethsaida, right? There was hundreds and hundreds of people there who were needing healing. How many did he heal? Okay? Jesus, in this passage, this is why I say this is pivotal, and some of you may be taken back by this, but this is one of those times where they come to Jesus and say, feed us, and you know what his response was? No. They followed him across the lake. He was the meal ticket, and right here, Jesus, they're hungry, and you know what he says? It's kind of like, how many of you have parents or are a parent, and you cook this really good meal, nutritious meal, and your kids come up and say, I want candy. You're like, no, I'm not getting candy. I cooked this nutritious meal right here. You eat this, right? I want candy. I want candy. This is precisely what Jesus is doing. They come to Jesus and they go, we want candy. We want you to feed us. And he's like, oh, I have something for you that is far exceeds any of the candy, any of the things, anything that you want. It's so deep and nutritious that it'll save your life for eternity. I want you to eat on that. You can have me. It's far better in this relationship with me than any other physical need or thing that you want in this life. This is what Jesus says. He says this, and then he's quiet. And he waits for a response. You ever done that? Where you throw something out to somebody and then you just kind of sit back and wait for them to respond and see how they're going to respond? That's what Jesus did here. He's quiet. And he's waiting because I think he's sitting here going, are they following me for who I am, or are they following me from what they can get from me? And I ask you the same question. Are we following Jesus for what we can get from him, or are we following Jesus simply because he's the Lord of Lords, he's the King of Kings, he's the Son of God? Is that enough? Is following Jesus because he is Jesus simply enough? Look at verse 66. It's decision time. It says, from this time, many of his disciples, and by the way, this word disciple here isn't the 12. This is the group that was following him. Okay, this is the crowd that followed him from one side of the Sea of Galilee to the other. It says, from that time on, many of these disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Well, that's interesting. So Jesus discovered that many of them were coming to him for what he could give them. Well, what can I get out of this relationship? It was about themselves and not necessarily about Jesus. And I need us to understand today, please hear me. If you hear nothing else today, I really want you to hear me that actually what Jesus is saying here is good news. Even though he said no to the physical stuff, this is really good news. And I know that what I'm saying today may challenge some of our commitment levels, and for that I cannot apologize today. But I want you to hear what Jesus is saying. Jesus says he himself is enough. Anyone? Jesus himself is enough. Jesus alone, without anything else, is enough. That's great news, my friends. That is tremendous news. Let me restate this because sometimes this is a slow sink. To me, the greatest promise that we've ever been given, the greatest promise to humanity, the greatest promise to true satisfaction in this life is not the things of this life, but a person named Jesus. He knows what's best for you. He knows what we need. If I can surrender my understanding to his leading, I believe that that's where true satisfaction comes from. I know that's where it comes from. I must admit, it's not easy. Why? Because I don't know about you, but many times I still want the candy. And when God says, no, I need you to go this direction, and I know I want to go this direction, and he's like, nope, this is where true satisfaction is, and I go stomping off like a little kid because I'm ticked off, and I know better than God, and whatever, and I run, You know what God does? When God says, here, true satisfaction is this way, and I'm like, I don't want to go that way, I want to go this way, and I start running this way, you know what God does? He lets me. And he lets you. Because God won't control you that way, because that's not true love. You can't have true unconditional love without true free will. So God lets us run. But you know what happens? When we finally hit that brick wall, when the candy hits and the diabetes kick in, God meets us right here. He says, watch, come on, let's go this way. I'll bring true satisfaction. He wants followers who follow him simply because of who he is, period. Verse 57, just as the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father. So the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is what we have to keep in the forefront of our mind, that the God of all things, the creator of this universe, right? He is the King of kings. He is the Lord of lords, the God who can, I don't know about you, but do you ever think about this? That the God of the cosmos could look at you and me and he could go, what an idiot. And he doesn't. Here's why. Because of his unconditional love and the most amazing grace that you could ever dream or imagine he has for you and I. And he may look at me and go, what a messed up kid, but he's taken hold of my Jesus. He's taken hold of my son. He's taken hold of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords in his life. He surrendered himself to the best of his ability to his leadership and authority in his life. And because of that, he is my son. And he looks at you and does the same thing. He's part of my family. You're part of his family. His graciousness is amazing. His peace, his contentment, and at times his overwhelming presence. The more I understand that these are the things that he's promised. Do you realize? Okay, hear me on this. Jesus never promised you to be healthy and wealthy. He never did. If you ever hear a pastor saying that, please run the other way and call me. Because the more I understand the things that he promises us, Jesus didn't necessarily promise health and wealth, but what he did promise us is that he would be with us. In the midst of anything that's going on in our lives, Jesus is with us. The same God, is the same promise that he makes, that he will never leave us or forsake us, that no matter what we're going through, he's there with us. So let me ask this question. What do you get for following Jesus? Jesus. What do you get for following? You get Jesus. What do you get for following Jesus? You get Jesus. And his promises. And you get to be filled with the same Spirit that raised him from the dead. And that promise is for you and for all of us who call upon the name of Jesus Christ in our lives. And man, it may not necessarily bring health. It may not necessarily bring prosperity. As a matter of fact, it may not bring the things that we think that we need or want. It may not necessarily be the bread or the fish or the water that we think we need. But he knows exactly what we need. And so when we give our lives to Jesus, what do we get? Jesus. So let me ask that question again. Is he enough? Is he enough? I must beg with you to think of the possibilities. Some of you may be here today and you're sitting here and there's this sense of wondering that there's got to be more to this life because you've striven for so many different things in your life to try to bring satisfaction and it's just not happening. You've chased after thing after thing after thing, looking for satisfaction in this person or that thing, or it just seems coming up empty. Can I just challenge you? I must beg with you to consider for just a moment the possibilities of what we've talked about today. Because some of you hear me today and it seems silly, ridiculous. You can't see it. It just doesn't compute. Can I challenge you today to just reach out to Jesus? And what will you get when you reach out to Jesus? Jesus is going to pick up the phone. He's going to be there. It's a promise. That's another promise of Jesus. If you call upon his name, he will be there. So that's my challenge. If you've never tried it, if you've never given Jesus a shot at satisfaction, I challenge you today for you to reach out. So that's my prayer. Some of you did it a long time ago. And man, life has happened. Life has been distracting. Other things have gotten in the way. And maybe today is the day that you reach back out and go, hey, Jesus, it's been a while since we've talked. And maybe today is the day where you reach out and say, you know what? I know I've been there. You are enough. So God, as we come to you today, there may be people in this room today that have never given you an opportunity. Man, they've been trying on their own, and maybe even inside of them, they're like, if Jesus is there, if there is a God, I'm trying to do enough good things and not enough bad things that I'll please the man upstairs. But we know that what you've asked for is for us to reach out to you. Because we can't be good enough on our own, and we can't do enough good things and not enough bad things. But you've said, because if we believe in you and we confess our sins to you, if we turn our lives over to you, that you will save us. And in that moment of your unconditional love and your grace and your forgiveness, we will sense your peace. We will sense your presence. We will sense your power and provision and protection in our lives. So God, if there are people here today that have never prayed that prayer, I pray with them right now that I ask them to pray with me as we just lift this up to you. God, we come before you in Jesus' name. We turn our lives over to you. I want the satisfaction of Jesus in my life. So Jesus, I claim right now that you are enough. And for those of us who maybe have been with Jesus for a long time, but man, life is one big distraction many times. That we've chased and pursued things that have gotten in the way of our relationship with you. God, I pray that we would be reminded that Jesus is enough. That you are our true satisfaction. That in you we have everything we will ever need. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.